Hello girls, I hope you're having a great day and staying safe at home. To continue with pollination and fertilization chapter, remember in the last upload we had learned self-pollination. So today we are going to learn about cross-pollination. You all know cross-pollination is the transfer of pollen from the anthers of a flower of one plant to the stigma of a flower of another plant but of the same species. Okay, so cross pollination also has its advantages and disadvantages. So large flowers with open petals and exposed stamens and androeciums are known as casmogamous flowers. Okay, so this type of flowers require external pollinating agents. That means they need an agent which will carry the anthers from one flower to another flower which is in a separate plant, but it must be of the same species. Okay, examples are oxalis, hibiscus. I'm telling you again, children, examples are very important. Okay, now, moving on to the advantages of cross-pollination. First is, since it is cross-pollination taking place between flowers of different plants, but of course, same species, the offsprings are healthier. Okay. Next one is the seeds which are produced, they are abundant, means lots can be produced, and viable. Viable means they do not die off easily, they are very healthy. Next is new varieties are produced because there is cross pollination. If it is of the same species and different colors, maybe a new color will come up, okay, in the next generation. Now moving on to the disadvantages of cross-pollination. The first disadvantage is, you know, that pollination is not always sure. It is not sure because we do not know whether the pollen grain of the flower will reach the right flower of the same species or not. Okay, because at the time when the pollen grains are matured, a pollinating agent is required. So that pollinating agent may also not be available at that time. Okay. The next disadvantage of cross-pollination is lots of pollen grains must be produced. Okay. So as a result, lots of pollen grains will also get wasted because all the pollen grains will not reach the right flower at the right time. And the third one is, to attract the pollinating agents for pollination, the flower must be large, it must produce scent, it must produce nectar, so it is uneconomical for the plant because a lot of nutrients is wasted for making the flowers large, for producing scent, and for making nectar. Okay, so these are the disadvantages of cross pollination. But you know, for the betterment of the species, cross pollination is very important, and nature also favors cross pollination. That means the flowers and the plants are made in such a way that cross pollination can take place. Okay, the first one is Uni Sexuality. That means the plants have only staminate flowers. That means cross pollination has to take place, or it will have only pistillate flowers. Okay, so the flowers will be either male or female, or they may be found on separate plants. So cross pollination is the only way by which these plants can produce new seeds. Example, palms, papaya. Again, I'm reminding you children, examples are very, very important. Okay. Now, papaya has separate male and female trees, but sometimes they may also be found in one single tree where there is a separate male flower or a staminate flower, and there is a separate female flower or a pistillate flower. Okay, in cucumber and gourd, the male and the female flowers are found on the same plant. Again, examples children, very, very important, especially for your section 1, your short answers. Okay, so next is how nature favors cross pollination. Next is known as dichogamy. Now, what does dichogamy mean? It means different timings of maturation of androecium and gynoecium. That means the pollen are released first. So when the pollen grains are released first, the stigma is not ready. It is still not matured. That means even if the pollen from here falls on this stigma, the pollen grains will not germinate. So cross-pollination has to take place. Or if the gynoecium or the stigma is ready to receive the pollen grains will not be released. It is not mature enough. So that way, cross-pollination is the only way out. Okay. So there are different types of dichogamy, as I mentioned just now. Okay. The anthers mature first. The term used is protandry. Okay, andry comes from the term androecium. Pro means before. Okay, example again, ladyfinger, sweet pea, salvia, sunflower. And if the anthers are maturing first here, the other one will be the stigma mature first, and the term given is protogeny. Guinea comes from the word gynoecium. Okay, example, custard apple, people. So in any of these cases, what is the only way out? Cross-pollination, so that seeds can be produced. Okay, next way by which nature favors cross-pollination is self-sterility. Okay, self-sterility means a condition where even if the pollen grains falls on the stigma, the pollen grains of the same flower will not germinate. Okay, so in this case, the pollen grain which comes from another plant but of the same species will only germinate. So if the pollen from the same flower falls on the stigma of the same flower, then fertilization will not take place. So that is known as self-sterility. Okay, next one is known as hercogamy. Okay, hercogamy, herco means barrier. That means there is a barrier which will not allow the pollen grains to fall on the stigma. Okay, so in some flowers, the pollen of the flower cannot reach the stigma of the same flower. That means the pollen grains cannot fall on the stigma. For example, in pansy flower, there is a hood covering the stigma. A hood is covering the stigma. That is, if the pollen falls, it will not be able to reach the stigma. There is a hood which covers the stigma. Okay, so that is a mechanical barrier. And another example is iris. Anything written in italics means scientific name, so you need to underline it. Okay, and finally we have heterostability. heterostyly. Okay, heterostyly means the stigma and the anthers grow at different heights so that the pollen cannot reach the stigma. Okay, the example, primrose, oxalis. Again, I'm telling you, children, examples are very, very important. Okay, so in some cases the stigma is very, very tall and the anthers are very short. Okay, and in some cases the stigma is very short and the anthers are very long and it is protruding outside. Okay, so that the pollen grains, when it bursts open, it will not reach the stigma. So that is your heterostyly. Children, on page number 40, there is a table, that is table 5.1, which shows the differences between self-pollination and cross-pollination. Okay, there are 7 differences which we have already discussed. So please go through that table. We'll stop here today. In the next upload, we are going to talk about the agents of cross-pollination. Have a great day, children. Stay safe. God bless you.